The rain-slick streets reflected the golden glow of the townhouse gates as Daniel and Clara Mitchell drove up the long, winding road to their new community. The entrance looked like something out of a glossy real estate brochure. Manicured hedges, a security guard in a perfectly pressed uniform, and a fountain shaped like a marble swan. Clara squeezed Daniel's hand. "Can you believe this place? Our first real home." The couple, both accountants in their early 30s, had worked tirelessly for years to finally secure a property they thought would be their future investment and sanctuary. From the moment they parked in their assigned driveway, Clara felt something was off. The streets were eerily quiet. No kids playing, no neighbors chatting outside. Most of the blinds in nearby windows were drawn shut, and the hum of luxury SUVs, idling briefly before disappearing into garages, made the community feel more like a movie set than a neighborhood. Daniel brushed it off, attributing it to the drizzle. Clara's mind, however, catalogued the details the way she always did with numbers, small, precise, and troubling. They had bought into the community after being dazzled by promises. State-of-the-art amenities, financial security through a strong reserve fund, and property values that would only appreciate. The Homeowners Association fees were steep, almost triple what their friends paid elsewhere, but the glossy marketing package assured them those fees went into premium maintenance and exclusive benefits. As accountants, they appreciated the logic. Pay more now, reap higher equity later. But already Clara noticed the pool was covered, the tennis courts deserted, and the fitness center windows fogged with dust instead of sweat. On their second day, Clara wandered down to the mailbox kiosk. There she met the first neighbor, an older woman named Sylvia, who wore a cashmere shawl and oversized sunglasses despite the cloudy day. "Welcome to Fairway Townhouses," Sylvia said, her voice brittle. "It's paradise if you don't ask too many questions." Clara laughed politely, but Sylvia's smile didn't reach her eyes. She shuffled away before Clara could ask anything else. That evening, Clara opened their welcome packet from the association. Inside were glossy photos of the clubhouse, the pool, the event hall, all pristine and beautiful. But when she compared them to what she saw walking around, reality didn't match. The photos were staged years ago, she realized, before the paint peeled from the clubhouse shutters or the hedges grew ragged. She turned to the financial statement included in the packet. Numbers always told her the truth. And here, they whispered of something rotten beneath the polish. The association's reserves were listed at $7 million. That seemed unusually high for a community of only 150 townhouses. Even stranger, the expenses were vague. Administrative services, $1.20 million. Consulting fees, $850,000. Foreign investments, $2.50 million. Clara frowned. She'd never seen foreign investments on an association balance sheet before. Normally, funds were used for landscaping, security, utilities, maintenance, not offshore accounts. Daniel, pouring a glass of wine, told her not to worry. "We finally made it out of that cramped rental. Don't ruin it with work brain, Clara." But Clara couldn't let it go. Later that week, they attended their first board meeting. The event was held in the clubhouse, where a crystal chandelier swung slightly from the ceiling as if from years of neglect. The board members were a peculiar group. A sharply dressed president named Victor Lang, a treasurer with slicked back hair named Robert Kane, and two silent women who barely spoke. Clara raised her hand to ask why the landscaping was overgrown when the budget for groundskeeping exceeded $300,000. Victor cut her off with a rehearsed smile. "You'll find that our association invests in long-term strategies. Patience brings value." His tone was polite but dismissive, like a teacher brushing off a child. After the meeting, Clara lingered, her eyes following the treasurer as he slipped a manila folder into his leather briefcase. She caught a glimpse of a Cayman Islands Bank logo on the corner of the paper. Her pulse quickened. Why would their neighborhood funds be associated with a Caribbean account? She thought of Sylvia's cryptic comment, "Paradise if you don't ask too many questions." Clara decided then she would ask every question possible. The next morning, Clara drove to the county clerk's office under the pretense of researching property tax assessments. What she uncovered made her stomach turn. The Fairway Townhouses Association wasn't registered as a typical non-profit corporation, as most associations were. Instead, it was filed as a real estate investment trust, or REIT. That meant the board wasn't just managing homeowner dues. They were treating the residents as involuntary shareholders, funneling money into investment vehicles that had nothing to do with the community itself. Clara ran her fingers down the filing, her chest tight. Was this even legal? Or worse, was it a deliberate trap disguised as community living? By the time Clara returned home, the drizzle had turned into a heavy storm. She pulled into the driveway and saw a black SUV idling 2 houses down. Its tinted windows reflected nothing. The engine purred, but no one got out. When she stepped out of her car, the SUV pulled away slowly, disappearing into the curve of the street. Daniel dismissed it as coincidence, but Clara's gut told her otherwise. Numbers never lied, and neither did instincts. That night, Clara spread the financial documents across their kitchen island. Every line item was a breadcrumb leading to something darker. She scribbled calculations on a notepad, connecting dots between inflated fees, missing service contracts, and offshore transfers. She realized the association was pulling in millions more than it spent. Residents like her and Daniel weren't just paying for amenities. They were bankrolling a financial machine that stretched far beyond the townhouse gates. When Clara finally closed her laptop, the house was quiet. Daniel had fallen asleep on the couch, wine glass half full. She padded upstairs, the weight of discovery pressing against her chest. Just before turning in, she checked the front door lock. A folded note had been slipped through the crack, resting on the mat. With trembling hands, she opened it. Written in neat block letters was a single sentence. "Stop looking at the numbers." You know what? Clara barely slept after finding the note. Her accountant's mind churned through scenarios, each darker than the last. Who knew she had been looking at the numbers? Was it one of the board members, or someone far beyond them? The storm outside had passed, but inside her chest, thunder still rattled. By morning, Daniel noticed the purple crescents beneath her eyes. "You're obsessing," he said gently. "Maybe it's a prank. People in these communities can be strange." But Clara couldn't dismiss it so easily. Numbers didn't lie. Paper trails didn't lie. Someone wanted her to stop digging, and that was all the proof she needed that something was hidden. She decided to test the waters at the next board meeting, which was scheduled just days later. The room felt colder this time, though the thermostat still blinked its steady 72 degrees. Victor Lang, the president, smiled at her like a salesman who already knew he'd closed the deal. Robert Kane, the treasurer, didn't meet her eyes. When the agenda reached financial review, Clara raised her hand again. "Can you clarify what foreign investments means on the budget?" she asked. The silence was immediate and suffocating. Victor leaned forward. "Our community believes in growth, diversification of assets. It's what keeps our property values rising." His words sounded rehearsed, slick as oil. Clara pressed further. "But why is a residential association structured as a real estate investment trust?" The murmurs from other residents started then, whispers like rustling leaves. Victor's smile stiffened. "Mrs. Mitchell, I suggest you focus on your own household. The board is elected to handle these matters." The gavel struck the table, ending discussion. Afterward, as she walked out into the night, Clara felt eyes on her back. The same black SUV she had seen before was parked in the shadows beyond the lot. This time the engine was off, but the weight of its presence pressed on her like a hand between her shoulder blades. Daniel tried to hurry her into the car, but Clara's eyes lingered on the SUV until it blinked its headlights once, slow and deliberate, before melting into the darkness. She gripped Daniel's hand the entire drive home, though neither of them spoke. The following day, Clara drove to the city library and requested old financial filings from the association. She traced line items back nearly a decade. What she found made her stomach knot. The board had been steadily increasing dues, funneling excess cash into offshore accounts. The pattern wasn't random. It was precise, methodical, every 2 years. A major transfer to the same trust in the Cayman Islands. She printed copies, shoving them into her bag as if the papers themselves might burn her fingers. As she left, she caught sight of a man in a charcoal suit reading a newspaper near the entrance. He wasn't really reading. His eyes followed her reflection in the glass door. Clara's pulse hammered. She walked faster, heels clattering against the marble floor, refusing to look back until she was in her car with the doors locked. That evening, Clara confided in Daniel. "They're laundering our money," she said, spreading the documents across the table. "The association isn't just mismanaging funds, it's operating as a shell for something bigger. Offshore accounts, disguised transfers, consulting fees that don't exist. We're trapped inside an investment scheme." Daniel rubbed his temples. "And if you're right, what do you think happens when they realize you've been digging this deep?" His words hung heavy in the room. Clara didn't answer. The truth was already pressing against her ribs, cold and undeniable. 2 nights later, Clara returned from work to find their mailbox stuffed with envelopes marked violation notice. According to the association, they had racked up thousands in fines: improper garbage placement, unauthorized landscaping, excessive noise. Daniel was furious. "We haven't even been here a month," he snapped. Clara's stomach turned cold. This wasn't coincidence. This was retaliation. She pulled out her phone to photograph every notice, every envelope. If they wanted to bury her in paper, she would build her own paper shield. The next morning, Sylvia, the woman Clara had first met at the mailboxes, appeared at her door. She looked pale, fragile, like a ghost wrapped in cashmere. "You need to stop asking questions," Sylvia whispered. "They don't like questions." Clara guided her inside, offering tea, but Sylvia wouldn't sit. She kept wringing her hands, eyes darting toward the window. "They ruined my son," she said suddenly, her voice cracking. "He tried to fight them. Now his credit is destroyed, his house foreclosed. He had to leave the state. Don't let them do the same to you." And then, as quickly as she had arrived, Sylvia slipped back into the rain, leaving Clara trembling in the doorway. That night, Clara sat at her desk, staring at spreadsheets illuminated by the pale glow of her laptop. She traced transaction after transaction, following the flow of money like blood through hidden veins. The sums were staggering. If her calculations were correct, the board had siphoned nearly $15 million in the last 5 years. Enough to buy influence, to bury lawsuits, to silence anyone who asked too many questions. She heard a noise outside the window and froze. A shadow passed by the hedge. Her breath hitched. She reached for her phone, but by the time she looked again, the yard was empty. The silence that followed was worse than any sound. Unable to rest, Clara visited a former coworker, Marcus, who had once specialized in forensic accounting. Over coffee at a crowded cafe, she slid the documents across the table. Marcus scanned them, his brow furrowing. "Clara, this is serious. A residential REIT structure? I've never seen that. It's like they're turning homeowners into unknowing investors. These foreign transfers, this isn't just shady bookkeeping. It's fraud at scale." He lowered his voice. "You need to be careful. People don't move this kind of money without powerful friends protecting it." Clara's mouth went dry. "What kind of friends?" Marcus's eyes darkened. "The kind who don't leave paper trails, only warnings." By the end of the week, Clara had collected enough evidence to fill a binder. She hid it in the trunk of her car, paranoid that her house might not be safe. But the association was already tightening its grip. Daniel opened their mortgage statement one morning and found a notice claiming their payment was overdue. Except Clara had the receipt proving it had cleared. She called the bank, furious, only to be placed on hold for an eternity. When someone finally answered, their tone was icy. "Your loan servicing has been transferred to a different management company. Please resolve disputes with them." But the company's name, Eastgate Holdings, was the same entity listed in the REIT filings. They weren't just controlling their fees. They were reaching into their mortgage itself. Clara felt her world tilting, as if the foundation of their new home was built on shifting sand. She tried to warn neighbors, but most brushed her off. "The board knows best," one man said. "I've doubled my property value in 4 years." Another shrugged. "It's better not to stir the pot." Fear and greed held the community in place like invisible chains. Clara realized she was alone, except for Daniel, and even he was beginning to waver under the pressure. One night after dinner, Clara gathered the courage to confront Victor directly. She dialed his number, heart hammering. When he answered, his voice was smooth, unbothered. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, "I've been expecting your call." Clara's throat tightened. "Why are you funneling our money offshore?" There was silence, followed by a low chuckle. "You're smarter than most, I'll give you that. But intelligence can be dangerous. I'd hate for you and your husband to find yourselves in financial distress. Mortgages can be so fragile." The line went dead. Clara sat frozen, the dial tone buzzing in her ear like a warning siren. Later that night, she peeked through the blinds and saw the black SUV again, parked across the street. This time, the driver's door opened. A man stepped out, tall and broad, his face obscured by the streetlight's shadow. He leaned casually against the vehicle, lighting a cigarette, eyes fixed on her window. The ember glowed like a threat in the dark. Clara dropped the blinds and pressed her back to the wall, breath ragged. For the first time since moving to Fairway Townhouses, she felt truly unsafe in her own home. By the next morning, Clara's nerves were frayed, like threads pulled loose from a once sturdy sweater. She poured herself coffee with trembling hands, the sound of the liquid splashing against porcelain louder than it should have been. Daniel tried to reassure her, but she could see the doubt creeping into his eyes. The constant fines, the mortgage confusion, the looming threat of the SUV parked outside, they were no longer just inconveniences. They were suffocating them. Clara leaned across the table, gripping his hand. "We can't ignore this. They'll bleed us dry if we do." Daniel sighed, running his thumb over her knuckles. "I just don't know if we can fight them alone." Later that week, the association held another meeting. Clara attended, determined to force answers. But as soon as she raised her voice, the room turned against her. Neighbors she had once smiled at in the cul-de-sac whispered loudly about her paranoia. One woman scoffed, "If you can't afford the fees, maybe this isn't the community for you." Another muttered, "Always the troublemakers trying to drag us down." Clara's face burned as she looked at them, these people who had traded critical thinking for comfort. Victor, sitting smugly at the head of the table, didn't even need to say a word. The crowd defended him for free. When the meeting adjourned, Clara caught up with a neighbor named Owen, a retired real estate broker she had hoped might see through the facade. "Don't you find it strange?" she asked in a low voice. "The transfers, the offshore accounts, the constant fines?" Owen chuckled, shaking his head. "Strange? No, it's brilliant. They're protecting our investments. You'll thank them when your property doubles again in 5 years." His eyes gleamed with a fanatic's faith. "Stop making enemies, Clara. This place is paradise if you play by the rules." He left her standing in the hallway, cold dread coiling around her spine. She realized the community wasn't just complicit, they were indoctrinated. That night, Daniel returned home late from work, shaken. His car's rear bumper was dented, the taillight shattered. He explained he had been driving on the winding road near the lake when a truck came up fast behind him, headlights blinding, pressing closer and closer until Daniel swerved onto the shoulder. The truck had vanished into the night, leaving him rattled and pale. Clara's chest tightened. This wasn't random. It was a message. Their enemies didn't just live across the street. They controlled the roads, the meetings, the very air around them. Clara's mind shifted into overdrive, analyzing the system not just as a homeowner, but as an accountant. The fines weren't punishment, they were leverage. Inflate penalties, threaten lines, and eventually force homeowners into foreclosure. Once foreclosed, the REIT could scoop up the properties at a fraction of market value. Each losses for a resident became a massive gain for the trust. It wasn't just laundering. It was harvesting. They weren't protecting investments, they were consuming them. And the neighbors, too blinded by the mirage of rising property values, were feeding their own wolves. She gathered her binder of documents and decided it was time to push harder. The next day, she stood on Sylvia's porch, clutching the evidence. The older woman answered with bloodshot eyes, her lips trembling. "You shouldn't have come," Sylvia whispered, glancing over Clara's shoulder. Clara stepped inside anyway, spreading the papers across the kitchen table. "Look at this," she urged. "The money's being siphoned out, setting us all up." Sylvia's hands shook as she traced the numbers. Tears welled in her eyes. "I told you, they ruined my son. He couldn't pay the fees, they foreclosed, and then Eastgate Holdings bought his house for pennies. He tried to fight back, but..." Her voice broke into a sob. "They destroyed his credit, his career. He couldn't even rent an apartment after that." Clara reached across the table, gripping Sylvia's trembling hands. "Then we have to expose them." But Sylvia pulled away, shaking her head violently. "You don't understand. They'll come for you. They always do." That evening, Clara and Daniel received a certified letter delivered by hand. The envelope was thick, the paper heavy. Inside was a notice of lien. The association claimed they owed over $14,000 in unpaid fines and fees. Failure to pay within 30 days would result in foreclosure proceedings. Daniel swore under his breath, pacing the room. "This is insane. We're up to date on everything." Clara's vision blurred as the words sank in. They weren't just threatening her anymore. They were tightening the noose. In the days that followed, Clara noticed a shift in the atmosphere. Neighbors who once waved now crossed the street to avoid her. Kids who had played basketball in the cul-de-sac no longer came near their house. Even the mailman hesitated, sliding envelopes through the slot with a wary glance toward the windows. It was as if she and Daniel had been marked, quarantined within their own community. And yet, the black SUV never left. Every night it was there, idling at the edge of their vision, a sentinel of fear. Desperate for allies, Clara reached out to Marcus again, arranging a meeting at a diner outside town. She handed him the line notice, her voice shaking. "They're trying to take our home." Marcus flipped through the pages, his frown deepening. "This isn't just about you. This is systemic. They inflate fees, engineer foreclosures, and then the REIT swallows the properties. It's vertical integration. Control the homeowners, the financing, the resale market. It's predatory finance wrapped in a pretty neighborhood." Clara leaned forward, her voice sharp. "Then, help me prove it." Marcus hesitated, scanning the room. "Clara, you're poking at people who can make entire lawsuits disappear. But if you're serious, I might know someone, an ex-board member. He got pushed out years ago. Said he saw too much." Clara's heart quickened. "Introduce me." Back at home, Clara tried to hold on to hope, but the intimidation only escalated. One night, she heard footsteps outside the window. She froze, listening, before daring to peek through the blinds. A figure in a hood stood at the edge of their yard, motionless, facing the house. She whispered Daniel's name, but by the time he reached the window, the figure was gone. Minutes later, a rock shattered the back porch light. Clara screamed, the darkness swallowing their yard whole. They called the police, but when an officer finally arrived, he seemed more interested in the paperwork than the crime. "Could have been kids," he said, scribbling half-hearted notes. Clara knew better. This wasn't kids. This was war. The following weekend, Clara attended an open house for one of the newly vacant townhouses, posing as a potential buyer. She wandered through the pristine rooms, noting the fresh paint, the staged furniture, the smell of cookies baking in the oven. But when she peeked into the basement, she found file boxes stacked neatly in the corner, each labeled with cryptic codes. She snapped a quick photo before an agent appeared, forcing a smile. "Great property, isn't it? And the association really takes care of everything." The woman's tone was rehearsed too smooth. Clara felt a chill crawl down her spine. She left quickly, her phone burning in her pocket with the stolen image. That night, she showed Daniel the photo. Together, they zoomed in, deciphering the codes. Strings of letters and numbers that matched entries in her spreadsheets. These weren't random storage boxes. They were records, physical backups of the very financial transfers she had uncovered. Proof. Real proof. Clara's pulse thundered. But as she stared at the photo, a shadow fell across their living room window. Daniel froze. Someone was outside. The knock that followed was slow, deliberate, echoing through the silence of their home. Clara swallowed hard, clutching the photo like a lifeline. She knew, with bone-deep certainty, that the fight was only just beginning. The knock echoed again, deeper this time, vibrating through the frame of the front door. Clara's breath hitched, and Daniel instinctively reached for the baseball bat he kept by the coat rack. They exchanged a look, a silent agreement, before he opened the door. But the porch was empty. Only the faint smell of cigarette smoke lingered in the humid night air. A single envelope lay on the welcome mat, thick and unmarked. Clara picked it up with shaking hands. Inside were photocopied pages of their bank records, private transactions, balances, even passwords scrawled in the margins. A note was clipped to the top. "Ain't stop, or you'll lose more than your house." Well, the violation had teeth this time. Their accounts weren't just being watched. They were being infiltrated. Clara's mind whirled. This wasn't harassment anymore. It was warfare, executed through financial pressure and psychological terror. Daniel slammed his fist on the counter, cursing. "We're not safe here. Not in this house, not in this community." But Clara's resolve only hardened. "That's exactly what they want," she whispered. "They want us broken, terrified, forced out, and I won't give them the satisfaction." The next morning, Marcus connected Clara with the ex-board member he had mentioned. His name was Leonard Hayes, a wiry man in his late 50s with deep lines etched into his face. They met in the back booth of a dim cafe, his voice low as he spoke. "I served as secretary for 2 years," Leonard explained. "I thought I was helping neighbors, building value for the community, but I saw too much. Offshore accounts, kickbacks from developers. They pushed me out when I refused to sign false filings." He glanced around nervously before continuing. "Victor isn't the one pulling the strings. He's just a puppet. The real power is Eastgate Holdings. They use the association as a funnel, feeding the ride and flipping properties into their rental portfolio. Homeowners aren't members here, Clara. They're assets." Clara slid her binder across the table, and Leonard skimmed the pages, his eyes widening. "You've got more than I ever dared to collect," he said. "But be careful. They guard this machine like a cartel, and once you're inside, there's no leaving clean." Clara felt a chill ripple down her spine. "Then we expose them, together." Leonard studied her for a long moment, then nodded grimly. "But you need to know, once you go public, they'll come for you harder than ever." That warning proved prophetic. Days later, a process server delivered a thick packet. The association was initiating foreclosure proceedings on their townhouse, claiming tens of thousands in unpaid fines and fees. Daniel slammed the papers onto the table, his face red with fury. "They can't do this. We're current on our mortgage." Clara scanned the documents, her stomach twisting. The filings were expertly crafted, dripping with legal jargon. But she spotted the sleight of hand. The fees had been reclassified as assessments, which under state law carried lien priority. It was a legal trap designed to snatch homes away, regardless of mortgage status. Clara's pulse raced. The board wasn't bluffing. They had perfected this scheme. The couple scraped together savings to hire an attorney, but the first consultation was disheartening. The lawyer, a polished man in a navy suit, skimmed the documents with a frown. "They're exploiting a loophole," he said. "And Eastgate's lawyers are aggressive. I've seen cases like this drag on for years. Most homeowners settle or walk away." Daniel slammed his hand on the desk. "We're not walking away." But Clara noticed the hesitation in the lawyer's eyes, the way he avoided mentioning conflict of interest. "Outside the office," she whispered to Daniel. "What if he's on their payroll too?" That night, as they returned home, they found the back door ajar. Panic surged through Clara as they crept inside, hearts pounding. The house was ransacked, drawers pulled out, papers scattered, the safe pried open. But nothing of obvious value was missing. Clara rushed to the bedroom closet, tearing through the boxes where she had hidden copies of her files. Gone. Every page, every spreadsheet, stolen. She sank to the floor, her chest heaving. They hadn't wanted jewelry, or electronics. They wanted her evidence. Daniel crouched beside her, gripping her shoulders. "We'll rebuild it," he promised. But Clara's mind screamed with the knowledge that their enemies were always a step ahead. Shaken but undeterred, Clara returned to Leonard. He offered her a flash drive. "Backups," he said. "I kept digital copies when I was pushed out. Haven't dared open them since." Clara clutched the drive like a lifeline. That night, she and Daniel sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through files that confirmed her worst fears. Wire transfers to shell corporations, kickbacks disguised as consulting fees, inflated invoices for maintenance that never happened. But one file froze her blood, a spreadsheet labeled Pipeline. It listed addresses in their community, including hers, under a column titled Targeted for Acquisition. Dates were assigned next to each, like a demolition schedule. Her home was set for July 15th, 2 weeks away. Fear sharpened into anger. Clara began drafting a report for the press, weaving together the documents, the photographs, the testimony. But the pressure mounted. Anonymous calls filled their voicemail with static-laced threats. Daniel's credit cards were suddenly frozen. Their internet went down for days, only to return with strange glitches. Every move they made was shadowed. And still, the SUV lingered outside, its driver always obscured, watching. Daniel grew restless, snapping at shadows, while Clara forced herself to stay focused. She knew exposing the scheme was their only chance to survive. The breaking point came at the next association meeting. Clara walked in, binder under her arm, Leonard at her side. The room went silent, residents shifting uneasily as she strode to the front. "You're being lied to," she declared, slamming the binder onto the table. She flipped open spreadsheets, photos, proof of millions siphoned away. Gasps rippled through the crowd. But Victor didn't flinch. He leaned back, smirking, and gestured to the association's lawyer, who stood smoothly. "These so-called documents are fabricated," the attorney said. "Mrs. Mitchell is in violation of community laws, and we have already begun foreclosure proceedings." Whispers rose, neighbors looking more confused than convinced. Clara's chest tightened as she realized truth wasn't enough. Fear had already bought their silence. After the meeting, Leonard pulled her aside. "They'll crush you in court," he warned. "But there's another way. The state tax authority. If you can prove Eastgate misclassified funds, you can trigger an audit. That's the one thing they can't buy their way out of." Clara's mind raced. A tax audit. It was risky, but it might be the leverage they needed. She nodded slowly. "Then that's where we hit them." The next night, Clara worked late at her laptop, drafting the report for the tax authority. The glow of the screen cast harsh shadows across her tired face. She outlined the offshore transfers, the fraudulent filings, the REIT structure. Each keystroke felt like a weapon, each paragraph a bullet. But just as she attached the final document, the house went dark. Power cut dotty. Silence swallowed the rooms. Daniel grabbed the flashlight, sweeping the beam toward the window, and froze. The SUV was in their driveway now, engine rumbling, headlights flooding their living room. A figure stepped out, broad-shouldered, moving with deliberate calm. Clara's heart slammed against her ribs. The front door shuddered as a fist pounded once, twice, 3 times. The sound reverberated through the darkness, promising violence. Clara's fingers hovered over the laptop send button. One press could unleash everything. But 1 second too late could end it all. The pounding at the door rattled the frame so violently Clara thought the glass panes might shatter. Daniel raised the bat, standing between her and the entrance, while Clara's trembling fingers hovered over the send button. The laptop screen glowed like a beacon in the dark room. Another fist crashed against the wood, then a voice, low and calm. "This is your last chance." Clara's chest heaved. With one breath, one whisper of courage, she clicked send. The file shot into cyberspace just as the front door burst inward. The man who entered was massive, dressed in black, face shadowed beneath a baseball cap. He moved with practiced efficiency, sweeping the room with predator's precision. Daniel swung the bat, connecting with a sharp crack, but the intruder barely flinched, shoving him aside. Clara screamed, clutching the laptop to her chest. The man's eyes locked on her. He reached forward, then froze. Outside, sirens wailed, growing louder. The intruder cursed under his breath and retreated, vanishing into the night as red and blue lights flashed through the windows. Clara collapsed into Daniel's arms, sobbing with relief and terror. The police searched the property but found nothing. No footprints, no SUV. Just the splintered remains of their door and the chilling echo of the intruder's presence. Clara insisted on filing a report, but the officers exchanged skeptical looks. "Break-ins happen," one said flatly. "Could be unrelated." Clara bit back fury. Unrelated? Their lives were collapsing under precision strikes, and the authorities refused to see the pattern. But deep down, she knew why. Eastgate's reach was long, and its money spoke louder than truth. The next morning, Clara's inbox pinged. A reply from the state tax authority. They wanted a meeting. Heart racing. She printed everything again. Backups of backups. And drove downtown with Daniel at her side. The auditor, a sharp-eyed woman named Rivera, studied the documents carefully, tapping her pen against the table. "If this is accurate," Rivera said, "Eastgate Holdings isn't just mismanaging an association. They're committing tax fraud on a massive scale. Offshore shelters disguised as maintenance reserves, falsified deductions, illegal redistributions. This could trigger federal involvement." Clara felt hope flicker in her chest for the first time in weeks. Rivera leaned forward. "But you need to know. Once we open this case, they'll know it came from you. Be ready." Clara thought she was ready, but she wasn't prepared for the firestorm that followed. Within days, their mailbox overflowed with glossy newsletters from the association accusing her of fraud, theft, and harassment. Her photo was plastered across them, labeled HOA Community Enemy #1. Neighbors glared as she walked past, muttering insults. Children whispered, pointing. Daniel's workplace received anonymous calls questioning his integrity, and rumors spread like wildfire. It was character assassination, meticulously orchestrated. The same machine that siphoned millions could also shred reputations with terrifying efficiency. But the truth had momentum now. A local journalist picked up whispers of the investigation, then published a story. HOA's Fairway Townhouses a front for financial fraud. Within hours, the article went viral. News vans parked outside the community gates. Residents who had once mocked Clara now demanded answers, crowding meetings, shouting at Victor and the board. The pristine facade of Fairway cracked under the pressure of public scrutiny. Victor's smug smile faltered for the first time as cameras flashed in his face. Eastgate struck back fast. Their lawyers filed an emergency motion to silence Clara, claiming defamation and demanding an injunction. Court hearings loomed. Clara and Daniel sat at their attorney's office, surrounded by stacks of legal briefs. Their lawyer looked grim. "They're throwing everything at you. If we lose, they'll take your house, your savings, maybe more." Daniel reached for Clara's hand under the table, squeezing tight. "Then, we don't lose," she said, her voice steel. "We fight." The courtroom battle was a blur of suits and jargon, but Clara's binder, her weapon, made the difference. Each page was a blade, each spreadsheet a grenade. Leonard testified, his voice shaking but resolute. Marcus presented forensic analysis. Rivera herself appeared, confirming that a state audit had been triggered. The judge, once cool and detached, leaned forward with growing unease as the mountain of evidence piled high. Eastgate's lawyers grew restless, their confidence cracking like glass under pressure. Clara watched Victor's face pale as truth drowned his empire. But victory came at a cost. Late one night, Clara returned home to find their townhouse spray-painted in red. Traitor? Traitor? Windows shattered, furniture overturned. The SUV was gone now, replaced by silence more ominous than presence. Daniel urged her to leave, to start over somewhere new. But Clara shook her head. "If we run, they win. We're not just fighting for us, we're fighting for everyone they've ruined." Her words rang with conviction, even as fear coiled in her gut like a living thing. The final showdown unfolded at a special association meeting called under public pressure. The room was packed, cameras rolling, residents restless. Clara stood at the podium, binder in hand, while Victor fumed nearby. "For years," she began, "you've been told your fees protect this community. But your money has been stolen, funneled offshore, used to strip equity from your homes. We are not neighbors to them. We are assets. We are prey." Gasps rippled through the room. She held up documents, reading names, dates, transfers. Faces in the crowd twisted from confusion to rage. Residents began shouting at Victor, at Robert, at the board. The air buzzed with revolt. Then the doors burst open. Reporters flooded in, microphones thrust forward. Behind them came Rivera, flanked by federal agents. "Victor Lang, Robert Kane, you're under investigation for financial fraud and racketeering," she declared. Chaos erupted. Cameras flashed as agents escorted the men out, their protests drowned by the roar of the crowd. For the first time, Clara felt the weight lift from her shoulders. Justice, imperfect and delayed, was finally clawing its way through. But Eastgate was not finished. Days later, headlines exploded. Hedge fund moves to liquidate townhouses amid scandal. The REIT, facing exposure, announced plans to offload the entire community to investors overseas. Property values plummeted overnight. Neighbors who had once sneered at Clara now begged her for guidance. She explained tax strategies, refinancing options, ways to shield themselves from the crash. For once, they listened. For once, they saw her not as a pariah, but as a lifeline. In the end, Clara and Daniel kept their home. The audit widened into a full-scale investigation, clawing at Eastgate's empire. But the scars remained. Broken glass, broken trust, broken peace. Clara stood on her porch one evening, watching children ride bikes down the street again, and wondered if safety was ever truly possible in a system designed to consume. The community smiled at her now, grateful, but she could still feel the chill of the SUV's shadow in her bones. Weeks later, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single page, typed in clean font. HE Fairway was only one of many. "Do you want to know about Brookstone Villas?" Clara's breath caught. She folded the paper slowly, her mind already racing. The war wasn't over. It had only shifted battlegrounds.